I come home from work sometimes. I come home from my job. I had a hard day at the office, dealing with a bunch of rubber snakes. One of the kids is in the driveway. He's shooting skeet with my rifle. He has your mother's eyes. I think he should give them back.
Hello there, colleagues and collaborators across town and across the globe. It's the 18th of June in the year of you historians who are looking at this document on whatever sort of devices you use in your day and age. I'm Paul Colby. I'm your host tonight for Public Affairs, Public Access. I've been with you many times before. I would say probably 50 times. For the most part, though, in those early years, you just got to see me and you heard me talk about the crack investigators who researched all of the important news that I bring you on this show. In recent months, we've decided to bring some of those crack investigators along with me because they love to be on television now that their identities are all blown. Nobody has any cover anymore. These people used to be in disguise, so you wouldn't have recognized them even if you introduced them to you now. Ernest has been with me for quite a long time. As a matter of fact, Ernest and I made a trip to the Amazon rainforest many, many years ago. We thought when we went there that there was not going to be much life, at least not much intelligent modern life. It turned out that there were these giant insects that I guess they look like a praying mantis. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Ernest.
Indeed, yeah. It was my mission was to find out what
we
makes.
discovered that they could actually talk. That was a confusing mission, but you know they would always ask us for parsec transducers or things like that. Anyway, if you're interested in that kind of thing, I think it's all covered in Ernest's forthcoming book. Are you still calling it The Dawn of Refrigeration?
Yes, it's a CFC title.
Okay, there you go. My second crack investigator here with me tonight is Immature. Emma, you heard some interesting conversations and she relayed them to me. That was a long time ago, though. Her cover was blown. I don't remember the year. Do you, Emma?
Oh, gosh, I believe that was 2009. 2009, yes.
Okay. Well, obviously, we had to move Emma into a witness perfection program after that. She's not doing that anymore, but she also has a new book coming out. And last I heard, the title was Who Are You Calling a Mammal? Right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Finally, I have with me tonight Bill Melater. Bill is a colleague. We went to college together, if I remember right, but I don't remember finishing college, so I can't be sure about that. Anyway, we've talked to each other for years and years, except sometime in 1964 and 65 when we weren't talking to each other. I borrowed his platinum golf clubs for a little trip, and some major airline that I won't mention here tonight, they seem to have lost them. Anyway, we got over that. I can't remember, Bill, exactly how did we meet?
Well, back in college, as I recall, you were putting yourself through college as a Tweety Bird impersonator, and I had the job of the Sylvester impersonator, and we didn't actually know each other, but by coincidence, we happened to go to the same apartment complex to do our gigs. and we met in the parking lot with rather a catastrophic result. So
It's all coming back to me now. Anyway, my investigators know a lot about a lot of different things, and tonight we're going to cover several areas that are very, very au courant, or they're current, I guess, if that's more American. We're going to talk about what this lockdown was like that we just all went through. We're going to talk about what the reopening was all about, which we're in the midst of right now. And we're going to talk about some of the protests that are taking place around the country. So if we down was like, there was a time there where all of us were trying to live on a one-time stimulus package of $1,200. We all got a check. It didn't seem like a lot of money at the time, not to me anyway. There are other people, however, who actually thrived on $1,200 for this long period of time where nobody was working. You should know there were plenty of food banks, I guess you want to call them. There were plenty of tent cities. So if you just disregard basics like, food
if I might interject, Dr. Boss,
$200 could go a long way.
Boss, my sources tell me
What's that now?
My sources tell me the corporations, because there's this whole trend to gluten-free and non-preserved food, corporations are actually giving away preserved food with extra gluten supplementation. So there's a way you can stretch your money.
Well, see there, I wasn't even aware of that. I was just eating some things I don't usually eat, but we're going to get to that in a minute. What I'm trying to get at is there are people who say that if you spent that $1,200, now, for example, people could purchase a medium-sized bat colony for really cheap, about $7, I think it was. Some of those people are very rich now. I'm not quite sure why. A lot of people invested in typewriter insurance because that is, dead cheap right now. Nobody uses typewriters anymore, but some people have cornered the market there. And there are also people who are able to spend just a little money and have personal appearances by some Elvis impersonators.
Actually, boss.
Yes.
My wife and I, we decided that we'd like to celebrate our wedding anniversary during this COVID period by revisiting our youth. So we drove to Galveston, threw rocks at his window, and informed him there's nothing left in the will. We then reconsummated our love in a park bench and slept in a dumpster. Just like back in college.
That's beautiful. That's very
Thank you. It's a moving story.
Thank you. I did it myself. I mean, with her help.
That is a heartwarming story.
Not in my case, but generally making love requires at least two people. But not for me, of course. But I digress.
Okay. Anyway, while some of us were starving, a lot of people did real well on $1,000, and I guess some of those people were doing a lot of cooking at home. I think most of America was trying out old family recipes or new recipes based on what they had sitting around the house. I, for example, there 50 ways, and during the course of this lockdown, I know I tried at least 13. Of course, my favorite is still boiled water. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I've been selling.
I made some compost roasts a couple of times, and I tried out the. Yes.
Actually, I was going to say that I've been selling some soul food on the internet.
I understand.
Well, you wouldn't believe what people pay for sautéed penny loafer and Chuck Taylor loin.
I
think I would believe it. I've read your
do you fillet them or do you bake them?
What's that?
Do you fillet them or do you bake them?
Yes. all the above, but I need to put a little extra time for marinating.
Okay, yeah.
Have any of you
be a little bit
tried,
tough, but
Chewy.
have any of you tried the auto salvage egg roll?
no, I have not been gutsy enough to try
I
that
know
yet.
there's a lot of recipes. Emma? Okay, well, there, like I say, people who did that, they made out like bandits. So nobody was going to work, and making a living was that people started interacting with their own children. Some of the children, they just barely knew anything about them. For example, some parents, I think it was Young's son, and that would be Byron Weldon, actually owned 2 minor league baseball teams and was making some pretty darn good money. Now they wanted to have a cut of the money he was making. I think they eventually agreed to get his allowance paid back to them, but he was keeping most of the money for himself because he now owns the Tucson Warblers and the St. Paul Shrimp. Yes? Anybody remember that? All right, I'll tell you what I know. He bought both of them on eBay.
Oh, that's right.
Both of those teams, he bought them on eBay, and then he had contests to rename them. I think the Tucson Warblers used to be called the Troubled Troubadours. I'm not sure what the St. Paul Shrimp used to be called. Nobody else.
I believe they were the St. Paul Saints, but I'm not 100% sure of that.
That would be kind of redundant, wouldn't it?
And your point?
Well, anyway.
It is the Twin Cities, so I think redundancy was built into the name.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Anyway, the end of this story is important. It turns out the reason he could buy both of these baseball teams so cheap was that in both cases, the stadiums were condemned. He didn't really have any money for for the ball players, and so he was just posting scores on Facebook and rooting for their favorite team. So there you go. Another example of who you discover when you're around the house more. A couple discovered that their daughter was actually a reincarnation of Johnny Carson. I'm not sure exactly how they discovered that she was Johnny Carson, except that she kept introducing guests that were coming over to the house. But she channeled a book from Genghis Khan, of all people. It was called Yeast We Forget. These were some of the recipes from a long time ago.
Boss, speaking of Khans, we have a daughter as well. She's just for show. So when guests come over, we say, "Have you met Marlena?" And so we coax her over with a carrot and let people pet her. And well, at the end of her lease, my wife has decided we're just going to send her off to the glue factory.
Oh.
That's very interesting. And, honestly,
Well, if she plays baseball, there's another possibility there for you.
Possibly for the St. Paul Shrimp. I was actually surprised to find out that I do in fact have children. I was unaware of this before, but I've been getting to know them, and I'm really looking forward to learning a bit more about them. Their interests, what drives them, what they're fascinated with as far as school subjects go, whether they're in school, what their ages are, if they have names. So it should be a really exciting time.
I don't suppose that they run with any dog packs, do they?
Honestly,
the reason
I'm not aware, but I do know that is a growing problem.
Yes.
In much of my
I think
reporting.
we have a slide, I think, about some kids in St. Paul, of all places, some youngsters who started following a dog pack because they didn't really have enough food around the house. And that's probably one of those families that ended up being well fed because they found all sorts of things on the street that could actually be eaten. Some of it, is past the sell date, but who really cares?
Oh dear, that may be my children because I did spend all of my money on this bookcase and books for interviews.
Well, it's a very attractive bookcase, though. That's important.
Thank you. I feel like it was a great investment. And the kids are really fine.
I'm childless myself, but I've heard they're very difficult. Children are very difficult to leash train. Is that true, Emma?
I think it depends on whether you keep them here or sometimes you can train them in college. They don't seem to get trained very much before high school. Down, they were doing what we would all call in the modern terminology binge watching. For example, I was pretty involved with a history of Silicon Valley, which has been showing on Hulu lately. I really like the episode where George Soros invents not only the internet but accidentally invents Chinese food. I'm sure some of y'all watch that. And the other episode where Mark Zuckerberg quits NASCAR because he thinks he has a promising future somewhere else. But then he ends up going into media, as we know.
Well, boss, I would just want to interject that my wife and I, with the amount of drinking that we've been doing during this lockdown, actually we've moved from binge watching to purge watching. And so actually I missed the last episode of Tiger King because I was holding my wife's hair.
Well, then I bet you picked up where that ended and you watched the Star Trek 1950 series that's currently on CBS All Access.
No,
I am really a big fan of that. I love that how the crew endlessly travels around West Hollywood. I liked it when Spock bumped into John Wayne. You really couldn't see that line coming. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I forget the line. That's why I'm asking.
Well, I think it's right after, he goes back in time and meets the notorious General Lee, and then together they jump Daisy's crevice to rescue Cooter.
I missed that episode. But maybe they'll repeat it. I personally was obsessed with the salt monster, although, excuse me, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
That's fine, boss. Go ahead.
Another thing that I think a lot of people are watching carefully is the Good People on Both Sides series on PBS, especially they show some of the sensitive white nationalist guys. They talk about their diets. I mean, a lot of them were eating the auto salvage egg rolls, and they said they had footage of what they look like today. But did you catch the truth about Mother Teresa?
Yeah, that was shocking. I had no idea she was a pawn for George Soros. And speaking of Soros, boss, only on this show can we bring out the fact that Soros spelled backwards is still Soros. I find the implications of that to be absolutely devastating. And mainstream media will not report on that, only on your show.
That's right.
That type of information.
And they covered not only that, but they covered the parallels between Bill Gates and Pizzagate.
Well,
they were both Gates, and I mean, you can only use so many Gates, right? Watching, some people are binge listening, because the most exciting thing that I have heard in a long time is the great speeches from the floor of the Roman Senate. There's an old Roman, old if he were with us today, that's Fluvius Caesar salad. And apparently he recorded all of these speeches on the floor of the Roman Senate, which are now available not only on NPR, but also on a cassette. He invented the cassette recorder back in 44 BC. I think archaeologists have even discovered lately a site of his old workshop. And we have a slide of that, I think.
This is interesting that you would mention this on the tail of the discussion of conspiracies. I actually have some pretty strong feelings about this. I think, if I think back, he once famously said, "Anno est interius lumen vestrum ad prehendet vos." Right?
As I understand it, Ernest, the translation for that is inside the anus, the light will find you. Is that in fact?
Exactly. Yes.
That's quite relevant to today's environment, I think. It's fascinating you pointed that out. Thank you.
Yeah, when you're feeling closed in, I mean, the amount of information around you, it's hard to process.
And speaking of, again, boss, when you talk about
aqueducts or give me bats.
When you talk about Bill Gates, again, Gates spelled backwards is set tag. I mean, what more proof do we need that he wants to tag each and every one of us? And again, only on your show can we get this type of information.
I thought that was from his days in retail. Before he got into the garage with Wallbanger, he was selling at Macy's.
Oh, that's you have some inside information I'm unaware of. That's well done. Well, no wonder you're one of the boss's top investigators.
Mm-hmm. It's a very deep dive, and honestly, as soon as I started scratching the surface, was when they let me go at KWTF in San Antonio, and fortunately, I was picked up by I'm not allowed to speak about my employer, but
right.
It's public, and it's you can listen to it, and it's national, and it's supported by a grant from the Alfred P. Newman Foundation, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
You know, you hear a lot of this kind of stuff on social media anymore, and one thing that we saw during the lockdown period was a very expanded social media. For example, a lot of people made some money by applying for a job with Netflix. Do we have a slide that shows that? I think we had the ad on the internet. A lot of people pretended to be able to repair problems with all sorts of know how any of their internet sort of appliances really worked. On that basis, then they could pretend to fix things that weren't even broken. And even the social media expanded into this consciousness of what it's like to be locked down, because, for example, you had distancing on Facebook. It wasn't that you were 6 feet away from a person, but you could not read their posts for 6 days. You know, if you just it wasn't unfriend, it had another name, untimely, I guess it was. If you just didn't communicate for 6 days, it looked like you had abandoned them, or vice versa. But while this is going on, the internet was so full of the news that Bill is talking about here, these strange news stories, that you started getting warnings on Facebook when certain things would be posted, and we have an example of that here. You've probably been to certain sites prompting certain stories or asking you to make an investment in something and now these days you can find that you're warned when you do these stupid things. While I'm thinking expanded social media, you know, it's really been a gold mine for certain performers who are technically speaking not with us, or I mean deceased, because they can still do concerts on Facebook or any other media, and who cares that they're not really there? Because we're not really there either. That's the way I look at it. During the shortage, there was talk of, during the lockdown, there was talk of a meat shortage. It was never really clear why so many people at meat packing plants were getting sick, but that is supposedly why there was a meat shortage. Do any of you know differently?
Well,
Why?
the animals, I believe, are refusing to be slaughtered. Now, the same thing happened.
Can you explain that?
I really can't explain it, although I know it happened with shrimp back in, there was a famous rebellion of shrimp back in the late 50s, I believe, where they simply refused to be caught.
Are you telling me that shrimp also are slaughtered?
Well,
Do we?
I prefer to use the term eviscerated, but you could say slaughtered would be an acceptable term, I think. Yes. But,
yeah, I believe that was 2015 in Searcy, Arkansas.
Yes.
Was the shrimp?
Is that why they're all headless when you buy them?
That is, in fact, they have little. I don't know if you've ever seen a shrimp slaughterhouse. They have little tiny guillotines, and they.
Okay.
They march the shrimp up the stairs and put them on the little guillotine, and then they're only about the guillotines are a fascinating example of mechanical engineering because they're precision instruments and they're only about this tall. Are you familiar with those, Emma?
Actually, what I've seen is it's kind of like they take them, it's misdirection. They bring them to a little boardwalk that has sort of clowns painted on the front. They stick the head through.
There you go.
This whole families of shrimp.
That must be the shrimp you get in Target and Walmart. The higher quality shrimp is made with precision stainless steel USDA grade guillotines.
I remember
sources tell me, and my sources are usually quite reliable.
I remember when I lost your golf clubs, you first told me it was polished stainless steel, and then when you were really mad at me, you said that they were platinum, and then you said they were solid gold. But of course, we never recovered those golf clubs.
To tell you the truth, after all these years, I was trying to make you feel guilty. They were actually made of fiberboard.
Okay.
Not actually metal, because that was a revolutionary new type of club. One other thing, well, two others. But let me make two more points here real quick about this lockdown. We have seen an outbreak of contrariness, and I mean on all fronts. For example, you used to see signs that said no trespassing, and all the signs in my little zip code these days say trespassing encouraged. Why? I don't know. I've seen stop signs that are painted, and now they say don't stop. And that can I
the only time
the don't stop. I've been told that that's used a lot in the porn industry. Does anybody know for a fact? I wouldn't know, of course, myself, but I've heard it's frequently used in the porn. So they're taking the signs that.
Well, I wouldn't know myself. I guess none of us here would actually know about that.
I believe my son is possibly preteen, a teen. I haven't found out yet, but I can ask him, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, have you also noticed a lot of littering? People are saying, dogs do it, so why don't we do it? And then another one I see a lot, and it's very surprising. If you've been to churches now, you see signs that say we reserve the right to refuse services to anyone.
Can I interject on the littering, boss? I've decided to litter. Not only am I littering, I'm going to start driving on the left-hand side of the road, because the left-hand side of the road is the road our ancestors back in the 1700s in England drove on. And the government is not going to tell me what side of the road to drive on. If you're worried about getting hit by me, that's a you problem, not a me problem. But
I thought that was...
Again, sorry to interrupt. I'm passionate on that subject. I just had to interject.
I thought that was a decision horses made and not humans back in those days when I was talking about church service here. I know that depending on the religion, things can be different. For example, Catholics who don't like going to confession are off the hook now, because with this lockdown, all they had to do was anonymously post their sins on Facebook. And I understand some people enjoyed that so much they were making up sins that didn't really even happen. It was kind of a craze, you know, one of those minor crazes that happens when that's different. To comply with the requirements for distancing and still have their services, I understand that some of them replaced the pews with airline seating. And so, like, nobody could sit in the middle seat. Of course, I haven't been to church
Well,
in some time, so I can't say whether that's true or not.
I myself, I have not been to church. I have been very pleased with what the availability of confession on Facebook, because you can go ahead and post anonymously. You don't have to worry about distancing. You don't have to worry about any of that. And with my personal account and my business account, I am actually able to get away with twice the sins. So it's been really convenient and very stress-free.
That's fascinating, and not surprising also. While we're talking about religious services, I think we've all noticed that Trump supporters, if we want to call them by their previous name, have now been elevated as true believers to the level of being called a church, a denomination, if you will, or I would say a cult. And I know that one way you can tell these people, they are all taking hydroxychloroquine, or you know, it's a variation of what Donald was talking about, but you can still get it cheaper at the Eckerd or wherever, at one of your local drugstores. And I think that if I understand what you were saying, Ernest, you've discovered that some of these people, impatient about there not being a vaccine for the current public health crisis, they're just taking every vaccine that is available for anything else.
Yeah, it's sort of
Do I have
vaccine
that right?
roulette. Yeah, I would call it a vaccine roulette. So basically, substitution is the name of the game. So whether you've got diphtheria, pertussis, hepatitis, varicella, measles, tetanus, rubella, varicose veins, HPV, TNT, HBO, all these things seem to be solutions that are right on the shelf of your pharmacy for anyone to inject in any orifice available.
Fascinating. And that's in your new book also, isn't it?
I have, yes, because I accidentally, I was reading the other night and I closed the book and I broke a vial. So it is technically still inside the jacket.
It's all right. Very good. So that covers most of the territory about what was going on during the lockdown. I don't think we missed anything except that, in addition to everybody talking about viruses, I know my computer was getting some abnormal viruses that I had not seen before. Basically, it just refused to work for a few days. It was like saying, you guys aren't working, so that I was just having, or if it was a widespread phenomenon. But anyway, that's a lot of...
Have you tried, boss, have you tried washing your hard drive in bleach? I hear that's very effective at preventing...
I have tried that, and the problem is I was not able to figure out which open, I have openings on the side here for USB and firewire and for SD cards, but I couldn't find the one for... I'm going to move to a new subject area here. What the reopening is about, or has been about so far, because the opening the main thing it tells you with us being galloping into the future here before we're ready to, is that the current administration is a lot more concerned with politics than with public health. I mean, you don't see anybody really practicing social distancing except Melania Trump. I guess we could,
Yes, boss.
we could consider that as an example. You've all seen, I think, the story in Celebrity magazine. Have we all seen that? Apparently, Melania doesn't even sleep in the same room. I think she's in the same White House, but she is certainly more than 6 feet away for most of the hours of the day. So I guess we could say that's an example, but otherwise, everything in this administration has been about let's get it going again, right? So we're talking a lot about job numbers. As far as I can tell, there are still only 50 states. So I guess that is a plus. It hasn't gone up from 50 states, right?
Well, it had been
Okay,
53 during the Obama administration, but I think it's
but it's come down.
Yes.
Ever since it's stayed at about 50. You know, one thing that's almost universal, salons. Well, all of those things are opening again, even though it's not really about social distancing. But I guess there's a benefit from that if we don't have a bunch of long-haired people running around while like we did in the 60s and the Woodstock era, while we're coming back to another law and order era, if you see what I mean. The clock coming back around to some of the same events that we know. Like Emma, I'm sure your children who you've just come to know, they probably read about this in their classes when they were still going to class, if they went to class. You know,
when we talk law and order, are we heading towards the law and order criminal intent variety, or will it be more like the law and order SVU? Emma, do you have a take on that? Have you researched that?
I think basically we're talking about the automotive kind of law and order, which, you know, that's basically about carburetors and ignition systems more than anything else. You know, during this reopening of the economy, there's been a great boon in employment opportunities for people who want to be paid Republican voters. I understand that you have free transportation to various places where you can vote, even if that be in several different states. You get the up to the minute ID cards that are good anywhere, and you probably get Secret Service protection.
You know, actually, something else right on the heels of that comment. Contact tracing has become a really big thing. So that's an opportunity for people. Jesus Christ. You know what? Mine are killing me. I can't. Yeah. It's an opportunity that is available nationwide. Youth, the XYZ generation.
Do we have any indication how much I can make if I decide to become a paid Republican voter?
It depends on how many states you vote in.
That makes sense.
And it's a sliding scale. If you got money from the stimulus, well, you have to subtract that. But most of these people will have made more money than that. They're not really eligible for a benefit like that.
They also they don't charge by. They don't pay you per voter, they pay you per polling place. And I personally made great money in 2018 driving, say, one voter to 3 or 4 different polling places. So it can be very lucrative.
Very interesting. For all of these reasons, of course, with the job numbers being so good, it's said that Trump took a victory lap recently. We have that map of the White House, don't we, Mr. producer. What I get from looking at this map of the White House, it shows the big desk room and the corporate lobby, VIP lounge and stuff, and the elevator that goes to the big bunker. But what I take from these black arrows is that the victory lap was a pretty short-lived phenomenon. I understand the president gets winded easily, and for that reason, I think he only made one lap, or part of a lap, and that included going by the big John and then the guest rooms that are being so forth. Anyway, right? Okay. Well, after that, though, excuse me? Okay.
I was just saying, my sources tell me to help him with his laps around the victory laps. They're actually installing several ramps between the rooms because he's so adept at going up and down ramps.
He does do very well with those.
So, like, when some of these talking heads on the news are speaking about guardrails for our democracy, I guess that's what they're really trying to tell us about in code. Yeah,
I believe so.
The president did, however, finally get his wall built, but it wasn't around El Paso. It was around the White House. So that probably has like 7 or 8 miles of wall around it by now.
Yeah, redundantly, it's sort of it's like a hedge maze, except it's chain link.
Okay. And recently, we heard about the president visiting the bunker, which he, of course, denied. He said, no, I was just going down there to look it over. I wasn't really visiting. There's supposed to be a lot of stuff going on down there, though. I heard there's a jogging track. Am I right there? Anybody confirm that? Or maybe it was an 18-hole golf course.
I believe it's the 18-hole golf course, boss.
And I think Melania's suite may be down there, since she doesn't sleep upstairs with the big boy, excuse me. I have also heard, since you have brought up the chipping a lot of these things that are part of our modern life, some of the Confederate statues that used to be around, I think there are chips in there, and I've even heard that a couple of the Confederate statues had been moved down there to that bunker.
Yes, it's also where the secret server is also located in the bunker. So we have finally investigated and determined where the secret server is. But yes, they are moving several of the toppled Confederate statues into the White House bunker.
Oh, I remember that server, all right. While we're on the subject of these, Confederate statues, they aren't all in the bunker because when the campaign decided to move the convention from North Carolina to Jacksonville, one of you told me, I think Emma told me this, that some of those toppled Confederate statues were actually being shipped to Jacksonville, and that's how we knew several days ahead of time that something was up.
Yes,
okay.
They did ask the statues to sign waivers, though, that they would social distance and that they would not sue if they contracted COVID.
That's why there were so many 18-wheelers, I guess. You could only put 2 or 3 on each truck, yeah.
No, the statues had limitations.
Yes. Are they using the chips?
Yeah, and I think it's written into law that the statues have limitations. You know, let me just bring something else up while we're talking about military stuff here. I understand that the president is refusing to change the names of military bases, even though the people with authority in armed forces are all fine with the idea. So they weren't even changing the names that dramatically. Like Fort Bragg was going to become Fort Braggart. Not that referring to anybody in particular. And Fort Hood here in Texas, that was going to be changed to Fort Hoodie because half the troops there are, are wearing hoodies. So,
interestingly enough, my sources tell me that before they decided to call it Fort Hoodie, Fort Zimmerman was under consideration for quite some time before they went with Fort Hoodie. They were a little bit worried about some of those soldiers being shot, but Fort Hoodie, I think, is the right way to go with that.
Yes, they have banned Skittles at Fort Hoodie as well.
Well, all right. Of course, now Trump, I think Trump himself, while he didn't want to change any of these names, he was just recently addressing the West Point grads, and he said he wanted to change the name of that service area to the Wild West Point. He said a lot of silly things when he was addressing the graduates. He pointed out that a big vocabulary is overrated, and I suppose that can be true. And he said it was time to call a spade a club. I'm not sure what that means, but he did repeat pretty often, what's in it for me, which is something that I think he repeats almost everywhere too, where he told the troops, do as I say. And I think that means not do as I do, right? But it's not...
Do.
Yes, sir?
Oh, go ahead, boss. It reminded me of a Frank Sinatra song for some reason. Doobie doobie doo.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to keep the mood light. I think we've lost our boss.
It reminded me too, but I wasn't going to bring it up. That's almost lovely. To pay to see Donald Trump. In fact, they didn't have a choice. He was going to come out there and speak, regardless of whether they wanted to hear him or not. But a lot of people are getting ready for the grand reopening of the Trump circus. And we got a hold of one of the tickets that people have to purchase to be able to get into the rally. We have that slide, don't we? And you can see that, it's the traveling circus and runaway nation of pure pre-verification. But the main thing is that by participating in this reality, or I was going to say campaign stop, but it's participating in this reality, really, that you hold Trump and his campaign harmless for anything, including, for example, I suppose, diseases that you might catch. Anyway, while we're talking about Trump and the election and voting, let's talk a minute about the Georgia debacle that just recently occurred. We have a picture of some people standing in line, but what you don't really get from this picture is that this is the back of the line. This is like 3 miles from the voting precinct. Now, my understanding is they tried to close down a bunch of the precincts, and they replaced some of them with gas stations being used, which are much smaller, can hold very few voting machines, if you want to know the truth. And there's kind of a smell in there too. But the complaints I heard, and y'all can tell me if you heard any more, the main complaint was that people were not allowed to vote because their picture ID didn't match their picture on Facebook. And we know, yes?
Yeah, I've confirmed that, boss. That's
a lot of people's pictures on Facebook don't match what they have in their wallet or their purse.
I think that goes without saying. I mean, posting a picture of your current self on Facebook would be like using your actual height on Match.com. I mean, it's just
Exactly.
almost never done.
Exactly my point. Of course,
Actually, my license has a comparison of me now and me when I was 10 years old, side by side, just to increase the facial recognition of any traffic stops I get into.
did it work?
Yes.
Did you get to vote?
Yes, I have now friended several members of the court because they've now found me based on my
Hot
documents
dog.
submitted.
Hot dog. Well, you know, well, I just want one more remark to be added here, that in Georgia, where they had these lines that were 3 miles long, they also prohibited the use of porta cans. And I think I don't think that that's particularly wise, but I could be wrong about that. Some people really don't need to go, or they can hold it for a long time. But other people are protesting. So let's get to this final area we want to talk about. What you see these days is a lot of so-called peaceful protesters, and I see those on TV most nights. But I also hear stories from the White House about Antifa elders that are out there on the rampage. And a lot of these elders, if that be true, must be disguised as young white people or young black people, because they certainly don't look that old, except for the ones who go crashing into police. But most people that I talk to don't really believe there is such a thing as an Antifa. They go to the web looking for more information or some official site, and they can't find one. But thanks to the efforts mostly Emma's efforts, we actually have an Antifa application for membership, and it's fascinating to look at. First, obviously, they don't want you to use your real name, but you are able to point out what your favorite color is. And then there's a section where you check your special skills, and that includes people who can translate the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm not sure why that is important today.
Other elements of the alphabet, I think, should be included. Other areas of the alphabet, I think, deserve representation, not just the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Well, if we had something to say about the membership form, I think that's the first thing. But fitting in with dog packs, that's another thing that's on this application.
My special
scanning and blocking police radios. Why do
my special skill as an older gentleman is it's taken me a long time to learn, but I have finally learned to fall harder than I'm pushed. So I think that's going to make a big difference in being promoted to that. And the handheld jammer it's a piece of high-tech equipment that only Antifa has access to. So it's an interesting conundrum.
Can't they just use?
Well, they tried duct tape for a while, but that just
can't they just use regular construction equipment like jackhammers? And I see. Some of you, I think. Well, I'm not sure about this, but some of you told me that you were there when the president crossed the street to hold up a Bible, and then he was asked about what were his favorite verses, and I couldn't hear them on TV. Did any of you hear what he said his favorite verses were? Something about a stitch in time saves 9, or
yes, a bird in the hand. Something about George W. Bush and why he didn't like him.
Is that in Ezekiel, or?
I believe it may be.
Yeah. I guess most of us haven't studied the Bible as closely as Donald Trump, so we're sort of outsiders in this game. But most of us are peaceful, and what bothers me is the weapons being used against the protesters. You had, in addition to the rubber ballots, which should be saved for election nights, and the fear gas, which is causing an epidemic of gaslighting, and the pooper spray. I don't understand really how they get that pooper spray distributed or dispensed on the scene. Anybody know?
I think actually it's part of the a chemtrail. They're now using pooper spray in their chemtrails, so that as they fly the jet over the crowd.
They had low-flying helicopters all over Lafayette Park. Maybe that's a variation on that too.
That could very well be. I'll get my sources to looking at it, boss.
And you know, while we see that there was some looting, it's not really a cut and dry situation about looting. We have that slide, don't we, of what we found at some of these sites that were looted. We have an approved looting site notification, which tells protesters to wear the appropriate clothing to signal their assigned drone photography unit and so forth. So I am not sure whether there was actually real looting going on. What I do know is that a whole lot of the law enforcement personnel who were present were wearing any identifying uniforms or badges or decorations or name cards. Don't any of you have a day job and so forth? But as far as I can tell, and maybe this list is not complete, there were people from the Office of Prison Conduct Supervision. There were some Park Service restroom attendants. There were some new people from the New Jersey Polite Department and seemingly black looters on scooters. I don't even know much.
I think the New Jersey Polite Society be fake news, because no New Jersey is polite.
In the short time we
And
had
I think that last one is actually a typo. It's actually black gentlemen who are playing guitar. So loot is, I think, misspelled.
It's an easy mistake.
Well, we could go on and on, except that our time's almost up. So did you have a final word there, Emma?
Oh no.
No. Okay, I have a final word.
Oh dear, my son hasn't eaten all day. I'm so sorry.
Dad
I'm
usually
so
gets takeout about now.
I'm sorry. You have a dad? Okay, dear. I'm learning new things every day.
All right.
Thanks for letting me be here.
We're going to be back to see you as soon as we can come see you again in probably another virtual environment. And so until we get back to you, have a fabulous time. Go back to work if it's safe. And if it's not safe, just live off that $1,200 a few more weeks or months or maybe years. There is an election coming in November.
I come home from work sometimes. I come home from my job. I had a hard day at the office, dealing with a bunch of rubber snakes. One of the kids is in the driveway. He's shooting skeet with my rifle. He has your mother's eyes. I think he should give them back.